The tension in Washington was palpable as news broke that the Supreme Court was preparing to announce a series of rulings that would send shockwaves across the political landscape. For Mark Kelly, who had navigated office politics and national scrutiny with cautious precision, the day started like any other. But by the afternoon, everything had changed. He arrived at the Capitol, expecting the usual briefings and updates, but whispers in the hallways hinted at something extraordinary. Advisors were uneasy, staff members exchanged anxious glances, and the usual rhythm of legislative routine felt like it had been replaced with a sense of imminent upheaval. Kelly's morning had been consumed with back-to-back meetings, a delicate balancing act between policy priorities and media inquiries. Each decision, each comment was measured with the awareness that in Washington, missteps were magnified. But as the Supreme Court prepared its announcements, the gravity of the situation became clear even to those used to high-pressure environments. The first ruling, already leaked in preliminary reports, immediately shifted the narrative. Legal experts were already analyzing it live, and news outlets began speculating on how this would affect Kelly's position and reputation. He tried to remain calm, reviewing briefing notes and preparing for the inevitable press questions, yet he could feel a growing tension within his team. By mid-morning, the first signs of disruption appeared. Kelly's aides noticed increased calls from senior staff, each more urgent than the last. There were murmurs of internal confusion and uncertainty. Political allies were unsure how to respond publicly, and opponents were quick to exploit the lack of clarity. Inside the office, the atmosphere grew more frenetic. Papers were shuffled, conference calls were scheduled, and yet the core question lingered in everyone's mind. How would these rulings reshape the political landscape? Kelly, known for his composure, was now confronting a reality where patience and careful planning were insufficient. The decisions coming from the court would ripple beyond the walls of his office, affecting public perception, legislative momentum, and his own credibility. As noon approached, the second ruling was made public. This one, more consequential than the first, prompted immediate reactions from state leaders and party officials alike. Emails flooded inboxes, urgent memos circulated, and social media began to churn with speculation. Kelly's team worked rapidly to craft responses, but even the most experienced staffers felt the weight of uncertainty. Analysts debated the implications of the ruling, noting its potential to shift power dynamics and alter strategic priorities. For Kelly, this was not just another day at the office. It was a defining moment. Every move he made, every word he uttered in response would be scrutinized for its political and legal significance. In the hours following the announcement, Kelly faced intense pressure to act decisively. He convened his top aides, reviewing options and weighing risks. The room was a mix of urgency and careful calculation, as no decision could be taken lightly. Meanwhile, outside the walls of his office, the media coverage intensified. Headlines splashed across digital platforms, live broadcasts dissected each point of the rulings, and pundits debated the potential fallout. The narrative was no longer confined to legislative discussions. It had spilled into the public arena, and Kelly had to navigate it strategically. His experience and knowledge were being tested in real time, as every choice could influence perception and outcomes in ways both predictable and unforeseen. By mid-afternoon, Kelly had managed to stabilize some aspects of the situation, issuing carefully worded statements and consulting with key advisors. Yet the reality was clear. The Supreme Court's decisions had reshaped the environment entirely. Staffers were exhausted, political operatives were recalibrating their strategies, and Kelly himself understood that this day would be remembered as a turning point. Every interaction, every media appearance, and every internal decision would now occur under the shadow of the court's rulings. The sense of urgency that began in the morning had transformed into a sustained pressure, demanding vigilance, adaptability, and foresight. As the day progressed, the third ruling was revealed, confirming the dramatic nature of the court's interventions. Each ruling had compounded the effects of the previous ones, creating a cascade of political and administrative challenges. Kelly and his team faced a barrage of questions from the press, stakeholders, and constituents alike. They worked tirelessly to communicate positions clearly, anticipate oppositional responses, and mitigate misunderstandings. Inside the office, the tension remained high. Even the smallest misstep could have far-reaching consequences. Kelly, accustomed to high-pressure decision-making, now confronted a scenario that tested not only his leadership, but also the resilience of his team and the robustness of his strategies. By evening, the full impact of the three rulings was apparent. Washington had shifted, if only slightly, but enough to demand immediate adaptation. Kelly reflected on the sequence of events, recognizing that while no single ruling was insurmountable, the combination created an unprecedented landscape. Decisions made earlier in the day, cautious as they were, now had to be reevaluated in the context of the new reality. The ripple effects extended beyond the office and into the national discourse, influencing narratives, policy discussions, and public sentiment. For Kelly, this was both a test and an opportunity to navigate a transformed environment with strategic clarity, measured responses, and an unwavering focus on both immediate and long-term consequences. The morning after the Supreme Court's three rulings, Mark Kelly's office was still reeling. The previous day's shockwaves hadn't subsided. Instead, they had intensified. Staffers arrived early, scanning headlines and briefing notes, preparing for the next wave of challenges. Kelly, though usually composed, felt the weight of expectation more keenly than ever. Every decision he made was being scrutinized, every action dissected, and every word measured for both political and public impact. The complex interplay of legal interpretations, political alliances, and media narratives had created a web that required precise navigation. Kelly began the day with a series of strategy sessions, each focused on mitigating fallout and controlling the narrative. Advisors presented options ranging from public statements to legislative maneuvers, but all required careful consideration. The first ruling, which had sparked immediate national attention, continued to dominate discussions. Analysts dissected its language and potential interpretations, while Kelly's team worked tirelessly to anticipate reactions from both allies and opponents. The urgency of these sessions was palpable. One misstep could embolden critics and erode political capital, while a well-timed move could reinforce authority and stability. As the morning progressed, unexpected complications arose. State officials and federal agencies began reaching out for clarification and guidance, reflecting the far-reaching impact of the court's decisions. Kelly's staff scrambled to provide accurate and timely responses, balancing transparency with strategic discretion. Each phone call, email, and briefing carried consequences, as stakeholders were eager to understand the implications and prepare their own responses. The cascading effect of the rulings was evident. Decisions made in one office quickly affected planning and operations across multiple layers of government. By midday, the intensity escalated further. Media outlets, having absorbed the initial shock, now focused on interpretation and speculation. Analysts debated potential outcomes, opponents leveraged uncertainty for political gain, and public discourse grew increasingly polarized. Kelly convened a high-level meeting with senior advisors, assessing both immediate and long-term strategies. They discussed messaging, potential counteractions, and the broader implications for ongoing legislative priorities. In these sessions, every detail mattered, from phrasing of statements to timing of public appearances, and even the selection of which topics to address first. The coordination required was monumental, yet essential to maintain control and prevent further disruption. While the political and administrative challenges were immense, internal office dynamics added another layer of complexity. Staffers, though experienced, were under pressure, working extended hours and navigating intense scrutiny. Kelly needed to maintain morale while ensuring that operations continued without disruption. He held briefings to clarify priorities, delegated responsibilities carefully, and reinforced the importance of focus and discipline. The team understood that missteps could have national repercussions, and Kelly's leadership was critical in steering both strategy and execution. By mid-afternoon, the first waves of public response began to materialize.
Social media erupted with commentary, news cycles amplified debates, and opinion pieces sought to contextualize the rulings. Kelly monitored these developments closely, understanding that perception often outweighed legal nuance in shaping public understanding. His team prepared targeted messaging, balancing transparency with political caution. Each statement was crafted to reinforce authority, maintain credibility, and mitigate criticism. It was a delicate dance. Too forceful a response could appear defensive, while too passive an approach risked being perceived as indecision. As the afternoon wore on, additional complexities emerged. Allies sought guidance on how to address the rulings publicly, while opponents exploited gaps in understanding to advance narratives favorable to their positions. Internal memos circulated rapidly, and Kelly was forced to prioritize actions in real time. Decisions made earlier in the day were reevaluated, contingency plans were activated, and every communication was meticulously reviewed. The pressure was unrelenting, yet Kelly remained focused, drawing on experience, legal knowledge, and political intuition to navigate the rapidly evolving landscape. By early evening, the scope of the challenge became fully apparent. The rulings had reshaped operational priorities, influenced national discourse, and created a series of cascading political and administrative pressures. Kelly reflected on the day, recognizing that strategic clarity, precise execution, and consistent leadership were more critical than ever. Staffers, though fatigued, were aligned, and Kelly's attention shifted to preparation for the following day's developments, aware that the court's influence would continue to shape outcomes in the near term. Every action, every statement, and every decision now carried heightened significance, and Kelly's ability to manage these factors would define both his immediate success and long-term credibility.
By nightfall, a tentative calm settled over the office, though the challenges were far from resolved. The Supreme Court's decisions had introduced a level of unpredictability that demanded continuous vigilance. Kelly and his team reviewed plans, prioritized communications, and ensured that all stakeholders were informed and prepared. The day had tested both leadership and operational resilience, highlighting the intricate interplay between law, politics, and public perception. As Kelly concluded the day, the understanding was clear. The rulings were more than legal documents. They were catalysts for a complex, high-stakes environment where every choice carried weight and where strategic insight and disciplined execution were essential to navigating the unfolding scenario. The following morning, Mark Kelly's office was a hive of heightened activity. Overnight developments and late-night analyses had poured in, adding new layers of complexity to the already tense situation. Advisors gathered early, providing updates on the political, operational, and media implications of the Supreme Court rulings. Each brief contained potential challenges and recommended actions, yet Kelly knew that prioritization would be critical. The interplay between national attention and local operational demands created a delicate balance. Any misstep could ripple outward, impacting both credibility and control. Kelly began with a review of yesterday's decisions and their cascading effects. Staffers had compiled detailed breakdowns of each ruling, highlighting areas requiring immediate attention. Questions emerged. How would allies frame responses publicly? Which administrative processes were vulnerable to criticism or disruption? What messaging could preempt misinterpretation while reinforcing authority? These questions demanded careful analysis, yet timely action was essential. Kelly's approach was methodical. He listened, evaluated, and then directed resources to address the most urgent matters first, demonstrating a mix of precision and leadership under pressure. By mid-morning, external pressures intensified. State officials, corporate stakeholders, and federal agencies reached out for clarification, all interpreting the Supreme Court's decisions in ways that affected their own planning. Kelly's team had to navigate these communications strategically, ensuring that guidance was clear but measured. Every phone call, memo, and meeting required careful wording, as any misstatement could be seized upon by opponents or misconstrued by the media.
The coordination between offices, both internal and external, became increasingly complex, reflecting the broad reach of judicial influence across political and administrative domains. As discussions continued, internal office dynamics became more pronounced. Staffers worked extended hours, juggling the demands of analysis, messaging, and response. Morale was tested. The weight of scrutiny made each decision feel heavier, and the stakes seemed higher with every passing hour. Kelly recognized the importance of both operational efficiency and emotional support. He held brief check-ins, reaffirming priorities and ensuring the responsibilities were clearly assigned. By empowering staff to execute plans confidently, he maintained momentum while reinforcing a sense of shared purpose. By midday, media engagement reached a new peak. News outlets were dissecting every angle of the Supreme Court rulings, producing commentary and op-eds at an unprecedented pace. Social media amplified every narrative, often blurring the line between fact and interpretation. Kelly's team worked on targeted responses, balancing transparency with strategic messaging. Press releases were carefully drafted, statements rehearsed, and spokespersons briefed, all to ensure consistency and credibility. The challenge was to respond adequately without overexposure, maintaining the office's authoritative presence while preventing misrepresentation.
The afternoon brought additional complications. Allies and critics alike scrutinized every movement, every statement, and every administrative adjustment. Emails and phone calls increased in volume, each requiring rapid evaluation and precise response. Kelly convened a series of rapid decision-making sessions, often pivoting between topics in real time. The fluidity of the situation demanded agility. Yesterday's plans could no longer be implemented without modification, and forecasts had to account for new variables emerging from public, media, and political reactions. Internal strategy sessions also revealed new vulnerabilities. Staffers identified areas where opposing forces could exploit ambiguity in the rulings, potentially undermining both authority and operational control. Kelly responded by reinforcing clarity in communication, ensuring that every office understood both the legal interpretations and the messaging strategy. Contingency plans were adjusted, and senior advisors reviewed potential scenarios, preparing the office for rapid responses as the day progressed. The emphasis was on maintaining control over both perception and process, ensuring that external uncertainty did not destabilize internal operations. As evening approached, Kelly reflected on the day's outcomes. The Supreme Court's influence had expanded beyond the courtroom, affecting operational priorities, political narratives, and public perception simultaneously. Staffers had adapted, but the intensity remained, signaling that the next 24 hours would be just as critical. Kelly reviewed communication plans, prepared for late-night updates, and coordinated with advisors to ensure alignment across all levels. He knew that sustained focus, precise execution, and strategic foresight were essential to navigating the complex environment created by the court's rulings. By nightfall, a sense of controlled urgency permeated the office. The events of the day had highlighted both challenges and strengths. Operational processes had been tested, messaging had been refined, and leadership had been validated under pressure. Kelly's ability to navigate this high-stakes environment required constant attention, adaptability, and clarity of purpose. Every statement, every decision, and every interaction now carried amplified significance, reinforcing the notion that in this politically charged and media-driven context, disciplined strategy and cohesive leadership were indispensable. By the early hours of the following day, the office had shifted into a rhythm shaped by both urgency and anticipation. Mark Kelly's staff had become hyper-focused, parsing every new development and ensuring that no detail, however minor, was overlooked. Legal experts, political analysts, and internal advisors worked in tandem, interpreting the implications of the Supreme Court's rulings and identifying potential vulnerabilities. Each decision made and action taken was weighed against both immediate impact and long-term consequences, reflecting a meticulous approach to high-stakes management. Kelly himself moved through the office with deliberate precision.
Calls, briefings, and impromptu meetings punctuated the day, each interaction requiring a blend of authority, diplomacy, and strategic insight. He balanced public-facing responsibilities with internal coordination, recognizing that perception outside the office was just as critical as operational control within it. Staffers noted his calm demeanor, even as pressures mounted, viewing it as both a stabilizing influence and a benchmark for performance. Throughout the morning, a series of communications from federal agencies added layers of complexity. Each message required careful evaluation. How would the rulings affect ongoing operations? Were there legal nuances that necessitated immediate administrative adjustments? Kelly and his team dissected these updates in real time, drafting responses that were both precise and adaptable. Every exchange, whether via email, phone, or secure messaging, demanded clarity and foresight, underscoring the intricate balance between speed and accuracy in managing politically sensitive scenarios.
By midday, attention turned outward as media narratives began to shape public perception. Every statement, every action, and every misstep had the potential to become amplified in headlines and social media threads. Kelly's communications team worked alongside senior advisors to craft messaging that reinforced authority, projected competence, and mitigated potential misunderstandings. Press briefings were scheduled strategically, statements reviewed meticulously, and spokespersons coached to maintain consistent, authoritative delivery. The aim was to navigate the intense scrutiny without ceding control of the narrative. Internal dynamics also demanded careful oversight. Staffers experienced fatigue and heightened stress, the result of continuous monitoring, analysis, and coordination under pressure. Kelly emphasized structured delegation, ensuring that responsibilities were clear and workloads manageable. Regular check-ins reinforced priorities, aligned strategies, and addressed concerns before they escalated. By fostering both efficiency and morale, he maintained a cohesive, responsive team capable of managing high-stakes challenges without succumbing to operational chaos. As afternoon unfolded, the practical implications of the Supreme Court's rulings became increasingly evident. Operational adjustments, policy clarifications, and stakeholder communications all required rapid action. Every move was scrutinized, not just internally, but externally by colleagues, political observers, and the media. Kelly's team executed updates methodically, balancing immediate responses with longer-term strategic considerations. Each decision carried amplified significance, reinforcing the high-stakes environment in which they operated. By late afternoon, Kelly convened a comprehensive review session. Advisors presented updated forecasts, highlighting areas requiring continued attention and potential pressure points. Contingency plans were revised in real time, accounting for both legal interpretations and political dynamics. Kelly's leadership emphasized clarity, adaptability, and precise execution, ensuring that the office maintained operational integrity and strategic focus amidst uncertainty. Evening brought reflection and recalibration. The events of the day had tested both the structure and resilience of the office. Kelly reviewed every major development, ensured alignment among key staffers, and reinforced communication channels for the hours ahead. The Supreme Court's decisions had cast a long shadow, but Kelly's leadership, methodical planning, and responsive execution had transformed potential chaos into controlled, actionable strategy. As night fell, the office quieted, yet the vigilance remained. Analysts continued monitoring media coverage, legal updates, and political reactions. Every statement, every adjustment, and every outcome from earlier in the day was tracked for consequences, lessons, and potential leverage. Kelly's presence, both in decision-making and strategic oversight, ensured that the office remained prepared, resilient, and proactive. By maintaining discipline, clarity, and focus, the team concluded the day having navigated a complex and politically charged environment effectively. The Supreme Court's rulings had tested authority, communication, and operational resilience. Yet through it all, Kelly and his team had demonstrated strategic precision, adaptability, and leadership under intense scrutiny.
Every challenge was met with preparation, every complication addressed with foresight, and every action executed with purpose. In a world shaped by high-stakes decisions and amplified narratives, the office emerged not just intact, but strategically positioned for the days and weeks ahead.